feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Day More NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming to you Thursday morning. It's February 5th, and this episode is being recorded Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time. So I can kind of timestamp this for you. The Ayo Dosunmu trade just happened. The Mike Conley trade happened 2 days ago, but that's where we are as we hit record. Those are the two Wolves-specific things that we have to get into for this episode. For any other moves that happen later this afternoon, we'll be doing another show this evening with Britt Robson. You know, and even if the Wolves don't make another move, Britt is still going to come to the studio. We'll discuss whatever else goes on this afternoon. But for Kyle and I, we were talking last night. Is it worth doing a podcast this morning? Just off of the Mike Conley news. Then the Wolves Raptors game was actually really good last night. We're like, okay, we're going to do it. We'll do an episode. It might become irrelevant shortly, and that might also be true. But I think it's kind of fun to do an immediate reaction to this Ayo move that just happened. Kyle, maybe you can start by saying exactly what the reported deal is, and then just sort of give us your immediate reaction to the trade.
Do you mind if I actually start with how 16 hours ago we were like, should we do a podcast tonight after the Raptors game? And then at halftime, it was like, okay, they're down 14. They look lifeless. They traded away Mike Conley. This is like the lowest point of the season. And then everything got a lot more fun. I'm excited. We're also going to talk about that game a little bit. But yes, you wake up this morning, whether you're on the East Coast, Central Time Zone, or the West Coast. And shout out to, by the way, our friend, John Krasinski, because he was the first person to scoop this, not Shams. Local reporting is important. So here's the final deal per sources. The Wolves get Ayo Dosunmu and Julian Phillips. Not a lot of analysis on my side, Dane, from him. And then the Wolves send out to the Chicago Bulls Rob Dillingham, Leonard Miller, and 4 second-round picks. So it is essentially, Rob for Ayo Dosunmu. I think we'll get into some of the contract stuff here because that matters too. A little bit of pre-agency here, as Bobby Marks calls it. But it's a team that, a day or two ago does the Mike Conley trade, and we'll get into that. Clears up some money, and then you're sitting there thinking, like, is this just a team that's trying to save money and not going to improve the roster? And I think those concerns were put to bed today. But it also should be acknowledged right at the top, because it's Ayo Dosunmu coming in, and most notably Rob Dillingham going out, that it is kind of it's an exciting trade for this playoff run, but it's also an acceptance that the Rob Dillingham thing completely did not work and was possibly the worst move transaction of the Tim Conley era. So you got to say that at the top because it's a young asset that you invested in that is going out. But yeah, they bring in another bench guard, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think when we're talking about the price of acquiring Ayo Dosunmu, it was Rob Dillingham, and on draft night 2024, the Wolves traded a 2031 unprotected first-round pick to acquire Dillingham and a 2030 pick swap. So if you look at it in this way, this is a big price to have paid. Obviously, the Rob stock price has drastically dropped over the course of those 18 months or whatever since that trade on draft night happened. Some of that's him not being as good as maybe we thought. Certainly a below median outcome for him over his first year and a half in the league, but also didn't get a lot of opportunity. Wasn't, how many total games did Rob Dillingham play? 15 or more minutes in his Timberwolves tenure. It'll be interesting to see what he does in Chicago. Somehow that's even more of a logjam in the backcourt than Minnesota is. But I enjoyed my time covering Rob. He was never, super pouty or anything, and for being in a tough situation, and the best him. But that was a significant price they paid to acquire Rob Dillingham. Also, Leonard Miller was an early second-round pick that didn't pan out either. Also, a product of not really getting opportunity in Minnesota, or Finch not playing him. But both of those guys are, obviously Rob more than Leonard were serious draft capital invested. So what you get back for them, plus 4 more second-round picks, needs to be really impactful. And as we've danced around sort of what exactly do the Wolves need from a role player standpoint for the last month, talking about the trade deadline, the thing that I've consistently came back to is finding a way to fill the hole that Nickeil Alexander-Walker left in Minnesota. And Ayo is a player who in terms of his archetype fits a lot of what Nickeil was in Minnesota. Now, Nickeil is doing a lot more as a primary pick and roll operator, as a scorer at all three levels. That like Nickeil Alexander-Walker is better than Ayo right now. And the season he's having in Atlanta versus the season I think that Ayo's having in Chicago, though Ayo's not having a bad season, shooting 46% from three. But the comparison I want to make is Ayo to Nickeil Alexander-Walker last season or in previous season, which was a really sturdy bench guard who can come out and give you things on both sides of the ball. He can initiate offense. It's kind of like, you know, Giddey is the primary initiator, but Chicago plays where they get into action with guys like Ayo, guys like Trey Jones, and that sort of way. Like, if you watch Bulls games this year, you would go, this Ayo guy is often playing point guard. He's also often playing the two guard, which is how I would have described the Nickeil Alexander-Walker experience in Minnesota last season as well. So that was a hole that this team had, and on the trade market, as I've looked at it, I think Ayo fills that hole as well as any player could. Not quite the defender Nickeil was, I think, a season ago, and not quite the offensive player that Nickeil has been this season in Atlanta, but a player who is going to give you something on both sides of the ball, and I think really bolster this Wolves bench in a way that is really, desperate for guard play at this point.
Can you just talk about whenever you hear the phrase bird rights? That was another thing that Bobby Marks had, but by acquiring Ayo now, they have his bird rights that they can, because again, I think you have to hammer home a little bit more in detail this Ayo Dosunmu, Nickeil Alexander-Walker thing, because sure. I think in just a perfect world in an uncapped league, right, in Major League Baseball, you would have just kept Nickeil, right, and just signed him to that fat extension that he got, and kept him in Minnesota, and then tried to, I don't know if it would have made sense or legally work to dump Rob and Mike at that time, but they didn't do that, and now you kind of go get a lesser version, but probably at a lesser price. But now this means that Minnesota entering the summer after a playoff run can sign Ayo, right, to a deal, and it won't really negatively affect them in like the salary cap way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just this trade happened a half hour ago. I'll try to talk to some more people, and if I mess up a detail here and there in terms of cap details, don't crucify me for it. But this one we know, right? It's called pre-agency because it's before the player's free agency, and Ayo is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season, and would be getting a contract to the level that the Wolves would not have cap space to acquire, right? They would not have the means to. We've got to see exactly what Ayo's market is and how much his contract's going to cost next season, but the Wolves certainly aren't going to have like 15 million, 16 million in cap space, 17 million if that's something like what Ayo's next deal is going to look like. Again, I don't know exactly what that is. I'll talk to people today and try and get an estimation of what his market is. But the point is, in the summertime, if they really wanted him, they would not, as the roster is currently constructed, have had the cap space to, or even the exception space to be able to go out and get him. So by getting a player through trade, you inherit what is called their bird rights. And what bird rights do is they allow you to re-sign your own players and do so and allow you to go above the cap to be able to do that. So it's basically like, if we get you in here now, we can give you another contract that we wouldn't have been able to give you in the summertime. And when you're strapped at the cap against the aprons for teams like the Wolves, that's your path to getting guys who are, above the riffraff of just like $5 to $8 million players who are, signing in free agency. This is by trading for him now is their pathway to be able to retain him long-term. And given that they did not only give up Rob and Lenny, who are good draft picks, previously, but also emptying the bucket of second round picks. That signals to me, without having talked to the Wolves front office, that a big part of this is attempting to retain him this season. And I would not assume that it is a rental, though other things could happen and maybe something else here. And, he isn't returned. But as I sit here right now and I look at the caption, I look at what the compensation was, I'm projecting forward Dosunmu signing a new contract with the Timberwolves this summer, in a contract that they would not have been able to offer him in free agency. That makes sense?
Yeah, and I feel confident, at least today. Like you said, anything can happen. There's still a couple hours left in this trade deadline, and then the summers can always get kind of wacky, but I feel pretty confident that they will try to re-sign him. Chicago kid, Ayo Dosunmu, played at Illinois, so now there are 2 Fighting Illini on the team. I think for now, this Illini is going to give you a little more than what you thought you were going to get from Terrence Shannon Jr., but he is averaging, just kind of for people that are, who is this player, shooting 45% from 3 this season. He is having a career year, which is good timing because he's in a contract year, but he's averaging 15 points, shooting 45% from 3. He's taking 10.5 shots a game for a Chicago team that now has 14 guards, but also 3.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 51, 45, 86 splits. He's going to fit right in. I mean, the Nickeil contract stuff is really fascinating to talk about, but also just like the types of games. Yes, he's not the Nickeil Alexander-Walker type of defender, but I think he's gotten better. But I also think, just big picture, and thinking of last night's game against the Raptors, that they came back and won, but those first 24, 36 minutes, I think Ayo Dosunmu is going to give you a guy who gives a fuck in every game. And last night, again, there's moments where you're questioning whether the Wolves did. He's going to be a bit of a dog coming off the bench, and they really needed that. I've talked about all season almost that they have 6.5 good players. It'll be interesting to see how this affects Bones Highland minutes, because Bones last night, without Mike Conley, gave you one of the best performances of his season for the Timberwolves. And those 2 guys kind of overlap in my mind, like their play style. But this team needed another, as we said, athlete. This team needed another guard. And I do think this addressed, at least for me, the ability to possibly close in certain matchups with another guy, right? Like, you have multiple options you can close with in the front court, but in the back court, it seemed like it was always going to be Dante and Ant. And I think this gives you a little more creativity, punchline aside, like if Chris Finch decides to play him. But I would imagine he will be thrown into the rotation when he arrives in Minnesota.
Yeah, let's touch on the 3-point shooting a little bit. Just through Ayo's career, rookie season 38%, second season 31%, third season 40%, last season 33%, and then this season 45%. And that, Kyle, sounds a lot to me like Jaden McDaniels, right?
Yeah.
And the sort of, you've seen it a little bit before, but kind of out of nowhere pop. I'm looking at it right now. Jaden McDaniels is currently 6th in the NBA in 3-point percentage at 45.4%. And I think this is updated after last night. Ayo is in 8th at 45.1%. So it's kind of crazy. The Wolves have 2 of the top 10 3-point shooters in terms of percentage, and that's without Anthony Edwards, who is, the most accurate volume 3-point shooter in the league, who he's at 40% on 352 attempts this season. So it is a guy who has been shooting at an extremely high clip, relative to the rest of the NBA, though I wouldn't, having watched him, much like I was saying, having watched Jaden McDaniels, I wouldn't go, oh, that's the thing he's best at. I would, it's just not the other guys on this list here, like Luke Kennard is first. Luke Kennard is a shooter, first and foremost. Sam Merrill is ahead of them. That's a shooter. Cam Spencer. I don't think of Jaden or Ayo as that, but they're showing that on lesser volume than those guys, shooting. Ayo and Jaden have almost the exact same volume of threes this season on, 4 or 5 threes a game, 4 threes a game. They're hitting them at a ridiculously high clip, close to 50%. And when you talk about, I think we've learned this with Dante DiVincenzo, the importance of having that good of a 3-point shooter around an offense that is so predicated on the gravity that Julius Randle, Anthony Edwards, and Rudy Gobert attract, right? Rudy on the roll, Rudy in the dunker spot. That's attractive too. Julius in a plus advantage situation is on the drive, is always attracting to. Ant is always attracting to. In that, it's extremely important to be kicking to willing shooters and shooters that are going to hit them at a high clip. Thus far this season, Dante DiVincenzo's been doing that. Jaden McDaniels is doing that. Ayo has been doing that. And I think functionally in the Wolves' fairly straightforward offense, right, that is playing through the flow, looking to find 2-for-1s and leaving putting defenses into the blender. This is another guy that you have out there who is a good play finisher from beyond the 3-point line. Does that take away? I don't know. I was looking up it last night, like Jalen Clark has taken 50 corner threes and is shooting like 28% on those. You remove, I think this is probably leads to maybe the removal of Jalen Clark from the rotation. You replace that with a better shooter out there. Mike Conley was not shooting the 3-ball at a high clip. Like now when the drive and kick happens and the defense is in the blender, it's going to more often be ending up in Jaden, Dante, or Ayo's hands, whereas before that was sometimes Mike Conley, Jalen Clark on down the line there. So I like the fit. There's, if I'm just being honest, there's still an element of like prove it, I think, with Ayo from 3 in the same way that I would say about Jaden too, like, which I'm buying, but this isn't a guy that's first and foremost a shooter. I think even if that stat is the one that pops most. That's the way I put that.
And I think you could argue that you probably thought prove it that before Nikhil's final year here, right? Like, because Nikhil made a bump up, and then obviously Nikhil has blossomed even more in Atlanta. Just 2 quick things, because last night I remember Jalen Clark catches the ball in that far corner and just completely misses it, shooting 22%. I think Ayo in that corner, right corner, 40% from 3 this season, and then 50% from 3 from the top of the key. Also, just back to that Chicago thing for a second. Casey Johnson, who does a great job. He's been covering the Bulls forever. But to that Chicago kid, you think a lot of the NBA players that have come from Chicago, he said, a word about Ayo Dosunmu. You can tell he's a Chicago kid. Wouldn't be denied. Relentless, hardworking, no-nonsense pro who loved hard coaching and always looked inward. Everything he gets in his career he will have earned. Was a go-to voice in the locker room for what we do. A lot of that stuff matters too, right? Like, I'm not trying to get Hallmark Cardi here, but those Chicago guards, those Chicago basketball players are tough as nails, and I think this team needed some toughness. I also think too, maybe you're upset this morning because it wasn't Kobe White, or maybe it wasn't Colin Sexton, or some of these other guys. And I think Ayo has a little pieces of all of that. I do think out in transition, he's a little bit of a pit bull. I think he's going to help with that. He's another option to, if you get a defensive stop, get him the ball, and he'll run with Ant. He'll run with Jaden. So it's going to be fast.
Than Kobe for me.
What do you say?
He's a better fit than Kobe White for me, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. And again, this was not one of those Tim Conley surprise trades. So we've kind of all been hammering home watching him play lately. But I think he's going to be a really good.
Yeah, I watched the Bulls-Bucks game yesterday. I was like, well, probably some of these guys are going to be on the Timberwolves.
Wait, was that the one that Kuzma threw that touchdown pass out of bounds? Or was that a different Bucks game? We should probably finish it.
But it's like Kuzma number one option, and I was like, this is fun. Sorry, I cut you off.
To the Bones thing though, like that one, I don't think people are too concerned about that. But those guys to me completely overlap, and that will be a interesting wrinkle, as this all acclimates, and maybe after the All-Star break and they start fitting the pieces more into a real rotation as you build towards the playoffs. But the Jalen Clark minutes are probably done. The Rob Dillingham minutes, I'm fascinated to see how much blame Chris Finch will get if Rob doesn't develop in Chicago now. But now it's like Bones or Ayo. And I would imagine that despite Bones' strong season and kind of comeback, Ayo is going to slot over him because, again, you did just like you do with Rob. You now invested a lot in trying to get this player. So you can't go into free agency and then bury him on the bench if you're Chris Finch.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would absolutely expect him to play. And I don't think it necessarily signals Bones being buried either. I mean, we'll talk about the game later. Great game, Bones Highland, Nas Reed off the bench. But, you know, they're at the point where that's all that's coming off the bench. Clark has really been rough for the last month. It was really, it's just better media seats in Memphis, right behind the Wolves bench, and Finch's frustration with Jalen Clark on not just offense, like more so defense actually was really mounting. And I think they clearly like Clark to some extent, but you remember what the vision was at the beginning of the season? It was to have Jalen being on the fringe / outside the rotation. I think he falls back into that and is more in like a specialist type of role, comes in and maybe plays in a game where a couple of guys are missing. I think that's fine for Jalen Clark. We saw his impact. We saw at the beginning of the season, he did impact the game. And when he was playing a lot, he was impactful. But if you've been watching the Wolves for the past month, he hasn't been bringing that. And I thought that was glaring last night of like, thank God that Nas and Bones are doing something, because what else is coming off the bench? I mean, Johnny Juzang played. They needed another body here. And I think Ayo slots in above Bones, but I don't think I think they want to play Bones when Ant's off the floor, and they want him to be like the poor man's Ant out there at the start of second quarters when Ant's resting, at the start of fourth quarters when Ant's resting there, and Bones can do that, and he's especially done that when Mike Conley has not played in the games. Those are his best games of the season. But also, there's been plenty other times over the course of the last month / 6 weeks that Bones has, been in the rotation, and there's been spots where he's not giving you that burst of offense, and he just is not a high-level defensive player. So now in those spots, you don't have to play Bones like he did last night, 9 minutes in the second quarter and 10 minutes in the fourth quarter, whatever it was. You don't have to give him 20 minutes if that's not if that offense isn't what's needed in the game, or he doesn't have it going. You can go and give those minutes, boost 5-6 more minutes onto Ayo there. I think that actually fits well, and I don't think it will render Bones Highland obsolete. Now, again, could be a little 4-minute soliloquy on something that's completely irrelevant in 4 or 5 hours. But as I look at it right now, I think it slots Bones into an ideal spot. Eighth man. That's cool. Like, they need what he can provide in the non-Ant minutes. And the non-Ant minutes in the fourth quarter won them the game last night because of Bones and Nas. But I wouldn't read this at all without having talked to anybody. I wouldn't read this at all as like a massive demotion for Bones. This probably settles him kind of into the role he was in when Conley and Clark were both in the rotation with him as well.
And I do think, again, you got to mention Rob Dillingham one more time, because since he got here, it's just, and then obviously a couple months later, they make the Cat trade, and then Dante slides in, and we've talked about that numerous times, but this is kind of a win for Chris Finch in terms of he just wasn't playing him, and now he's got another option. And now, again, I think the pressure kind of goes back on Chris Finch to what you just talked about of trying to isolate. Now you have more guys that theoretically you should trust in your rotation. Mm-hmm. And how will that play itself out over the next couple months? But for a team that needed more talent, that was trusted by, the coaching staff, but also could just produce, this seems like a costly move to fix that hole based on all the other moves, but one that you had to make. And just one note on Julian Phillips, because as you were breaking that all down, I just had to go look him up. He was drafted 35th overall in the 2023 NBA draft by the Boston Celtics, right? Or 2 picks after Leonard Miller. Yep, so I don't think you and I did a ton of research on Julian Phillips yet this morning, but if you're sad to see Leonard Miller go because you're like, oh, that was this multi-tool guy that maybe he could do some stuff. Julian Phillips, also a young, really athletic, comes out of Tennessee. It'll be interesting just to see. If you're living down in Des Moines, maybe you'll get to see some Julian Phillips coming up. But
I'm not sure what that role will look like, or if that was, salary fodder, or someone that, kind of maybe to bring up Nikhil again, a guy that they were targeting with the salary filler, maybe someone that they're they're interested in. This front office does have a ton of connections to the Chicago area, and has had a presence there scouting that team for a while. So to be determined if that's cap filler, if there's a little intrigue there, and then just frankly on a personal level, I need to better familiarize myself with Julian Phillips as a player. Maybe by later this afternoon we'll have more information on that when we talk to Britt. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. We would like to announce that we are doing a live show at Falling Knife on Friday, February 13th at 7 p.m. A happy hour at 6 p.m. We'll be getting set up, hanging out in the tap room at Falling Knife, and we have at least one trade to talk about here in the Ayo Dosunmu trade at the live show. It will be again on February 13th. That's that first Friday of the All-Star break. So we'll have the rookie sophomore game, whatever they call that now. That'll be on the TVs. They got the celebrity game going on. It's a place to spend your All-Star weekend on Friday night with myself and Britt Robson. Again, the live show will be at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. We'll be hanging out for a bit afterwards, but get there at 6 p.m., especially if you want to lock down a seat, one of the booths. It is February, so we will be indoors and not outdoors, out on the stage. So come early, hang out. Friday, February 13th at Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. Happy hour 6 p.m. Live show at 7 p.m. We'll be hanging out there for the evening. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company, Northeast Minneapolis. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. And I've been telling you, you could go to Prize Picks to wager on Giannis Antetokounmpo's next team. I've also been telling you the whole time that the most likely team that Giannis is on past the deadline, according to the odds, was Milwaukee. And that looks like that will prove to have been the right prognostication. So you can mess around on there. If you listen to this during the deadline, you can still kind of wager on where some players are being traded. But I think the main thing, over on Prize Picks, you're going to be looking at today or over the weekend is putting together a Super Bowl lineup. If there's ever a time where it's fun to put something together, it's Super Bowl Sunday. Find a list of players that you like or dislike in the game. Looking at Sam Darnold, more or less than 229.5 passing yards. Ramondre Stevenson, more or less than 50.5 rushing yards. Drake May has a free square. You can also wager on the point spread of the game over on Prize Picks, and you can do that here in Minnesota. If you do not yet have a Prize Picks account, all you have to do is put in the promo code Dane when you sign up. You'll receive $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. That's prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app using promo code Dane. Let's do a little bit of Conley. I know this is we did a what day was that? What day is it? We did a pod Tuesday morning, and shortly after that, Mike Conley was involved in a 3-team trade that was functionally a salary dump of Mike's $10.5 million contract at the cost of the Wolves swapping their first-round pick in this draft with the Detroit Pistons, which isn't nothing. As of today, the Wolves would be like the 23rd pick, and the Bulls would be the 29th pick, I believe, or that was
the Pistons.
That was yesterday. Yeah, sorry, the Pistons.
Yep.
My team's mixed
it's
up.
Fun.
Here.
It's fun to have another Pistons Timberwolves like draft thing. Right now, I got to watch Pistons games again. Like the Motown Minute is back.
Right, totally for Bear J. But yeah, I mean that's not nothing. Like 6 picks in the first round.
Right.
Like that you sometimes see more so on draft night. You see teams trading a future first round pick to move up 6 picks, maybe 8, 10 picks. But the Wolves gave up something there to get off of Mike Conley's contract, which creates a lot more space beneath the second apron for this team to be able to, in conjunction with other moves, add salary back without going into the second apron, which they're not going to do. But not only that, what I think is really important to hit on with it is it brings them below the first apron. And what that means is it opens up a greater volume of teams that they can trade with, or a greater volume of teams that they can trade with more easily. When you're above the first apron, you're in the aprons at all, it is very difficult to make a trade with another team within the aprons. Now the Wolves are out of the apron, making it easier to trade with the many teams that are in the aprons. It also allows them to take back more money in a trade, which I haven't actually even written it down. I wouldn't be surprised if that, well, Rob's like 6.5, Leonard's that. They might, I think they probably took back more money in this Bulls trade with Dosunmu and Phillips than they sent out. Regardless, they can do that now. So it opens up cap flexibility. It opens up the opportunity to make more moves, which would, if we tie that to a Giannis trade, it opens up possibilities to be able to, trade with some teams that are in the aprons. Maybe if you needed to try to get off of Julius Randle's salary or try to liquidate it into first-round picks or McDaniels or Nas or Rudy, whatever it might be. That was the value in that trade, and it was at the cost of moving back a handful of spots from probably early mid-20s to very end of the draft. I mean, Detroit's probably going to finish the season with the second best record. I think that'll end up being the 29th pick. I guess we know the Wolves will now have the 29th pick in the draft. To be determined how much of a gap that is. But from a salary cap standpoint, that's what this move gives them. And it comes, well, maybe comes at the cost of losing Mike Conley. But as I noted yesterday on Twitter, after Mike Conley was again traded from the Bulls to the Hornets, it was the Hornets, right? Was the second trade?
Yeah.
He's currently on the Hornets. What can now happen after being traded again is Mike Conley can be bought out from that contract and re-sign with the Timberwolves. If Mike Conley would have just been bought out by the Bulls without being traded again, he could not go back to the Timberwolves. So there is now a possibility that Mike Conley can be bought out of his $10.5 million expiring contract and re-signed by the Timberwolves on, a lesser probably a minimum contract. They could actually even, I think, pay him more than the minimum if they use their taxpayer mid-level exception. And I am told that the Wolves are working on that, and that is in consideration. It will depend on some of what what the demand for Mike is out there. Not only on the buyout market, like, is there a team that gives Mike a better opportunity to play in his view? It's Houston or something like that. He could choose that, or a team could trade for Mike Conley on his $10.5 million contract, not wanting to buy him out and just have him be their point guard the rest of the way. So Mike would need to be bought out by the Hornets or traded again, bought out by another team, but he can come back to the Timberwolves. And I think it's something the Wolves would welcome if nothing. As of yesterday, that was something that they were very much considering. I haven't talked to them since this Ayo move, and I don't know, that's a point guard. Maybe in theory that makes bringing back Mike less appetizing to them, but I know they wanted to have Mike back, and he was a casualty of this aprons era and the salary cap and the contract he was on there. So to be determined on Mike, but that was that was the story behind that move. Obviously justified from a basketball standpoint by Mike having a just frankly brutal January in terms of his individual production as an offensive player. Did I miss anything on the Conley piece? Or do you have follow-ups on that?
No, I believe that the plan was, as of yesterday, to bring him back by all intents and purposes. And then today's trade, I guess publicly kind of makes it a little more fascinating, because since the Mike Conley trade, again, just kind of like one little domino at a time, Bones Highland has played really well. Then you go get Ayo Dosunmu, and now you're like, okay, so even if you do bring Mike back, where does he slot into when you factor in the fact that he had a brutal January? Does he just come back as kind of a voice in the locker room type thing, which was still a big part of what his role was here, but there are less minutes right now available at the guard spot for Mike. But yeah, I just think it was a kind of a fascinating reminder of this new CBA. The first time he gets traded, it's like, I had friends being like, can they buy him out and bring him back? It's like, no. And then an hour later he gets traded again. And then you're like, yeah, they absolutely can do that. So that'll be fascinating. Also, we're doing this right now at 10:36 a.m. Central Time, so there's still a half dozen hours until the deadline to see if they make any other moves. But I still expect Mike to be back. I just, to your point about the Houston Rockets, like specifically, or maybe the Lakers or something, like if Mike comes back here, I don't think it would be for basketball reasons, to be honest, like just my opinion. Cause like now there seems like there's more.
Yeah, but that would be how you would approach it. I'm not sure that's the reality of if he was back on the roster, how Chris Finch would approach that.
Right? Yeah, no, that's fair. I also think too, like I've said before, everything that he brings to the table outside of the court is great, but on the court, it was just not working. And then last night again, and maybe I have no other Mike Conley notes here, but maybe this is how you pivot into what was a really impressive or historically timed victory last night in Toronto for the first time since Bruce Lee died. That was because Mike Conley, in my opinion, wasn't out there and Bones Highland was getting a longer leash. So whatever happens with Mike, I'm sure we'll find out in the next couple of days. He'll have options. I'd be shocked, Dane, if someone traded for his $10 million contract, right? Like that doesn't, off the top of your head, make a ton of sense.
Unless it was like in
some expiring thing, yeah.
Sort of
okay.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah, I agree with you. I just don't like. It's not out of the realm of possibilities that it could be used in that sort of way.
Before the game.
Okay,
quick,
I just got a text here. Hold on.
Let me see if I was in the group chat.
Delete that tweet I just did.
Do you want me to filibuster?
The Wolves are using that trade exception. Okay, so the Wolves generated a $7.58 million trade exception in the Nickeil Alexander-Walker trade, which means you can, it's a gift card, right? You can use that to acquire a player for under that amount of money. Ayo makes $7.52 million. So the Wolves, and that was what I thought was happening initially, was okay, they're just going to absorb him into that exception and then trade draft picks to be able to get him. But then I saw Dillingham and Leonard Miller were in it too. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't need to use the gift card because they are your matching salary rather than that. But I think what I'm being told is mechanically they are going to use that trade exception, absorb him into that. And then I'm assuming what that will be is a simultaneous trade where Dillingham and Miller are sent to the Bulls, which would create a new trade exception actually for the sum of Leonard and Rob's contract, which I believe would be $9 million, or maybe it's the most of that. But they are using that trade exception there. I don't know if that will functionally prove to have value, but it could as they move forward here in the next 3 hours before the trade deadline. So yeah, just to keep an eye open on that, but they are using the trade exception there.
Yeah, I just checked. I did not get that text. So thanks for bringing that up. You mentioned something earlier, and I think it's timely. I know this is a little more of a fluid podcast that will age out quickly. But they make this big, they trade Mike, right? And possibly they'll bring him back on the buyout market. We'll see. And then they make this move for Ayo Dosunmu to fortify their backcourt. But the elephant in the room all week, or the last couple of weeks, has also been the Giannis stuff. So with a half dozen hours remaining until the trade deadline, you're starting to see more people maybe say that the Timberwolves are no longer interested. I think you and I have always been a little pessimistic on how interested they were in the beginning, or just, I guess my thing, Dane, I should have said this when we did the pod the other day, but all these Tim Conley moves kind of come out of nowhere. And again, shout out to John for scooping this one, but they're always just kind of like, oh, we hadn't even thought of that. We hadn't even heard of that. This big move, that big move. I mean, the Karl-Anthony Towns trade happened on September 30th. Like, we didn't really see that one coming. But with this Giannis stuff, it just felt interesting that there was so much noise out there to how interested they were, how hard they were working. And I guess, what was your thoughts on that? I mean, again, there's still fluid here and active time to figure this out. But do you ever think that they were as interested, or do you think this was more of their strategy to just make a smaller move with the limited assets they have and not try to break up a core that we talked about 48 hours ago?
You're saying from a Giannis trade standpoint?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the analogy is like it was a lot of different roads. and they were building those roads simultaneously. And, the Giannis one is windy and complicated and big. And then there was other pathways. That's just how, to use the whiteboard analogy, that's like, it's on the whiteboard. It's in that column, but this has been a column for them that they, I don't think, ever lost sight of in pursuit of Giannis. And I don't know if this move in trading Dillingham and the 4 second-round picks, now how much less likely that makes the Giannis thing. But I was always skeptical about the Wolves being able to get to that compensation point, period. But given that what I know now of them still kind of figuring out if they are using this trade exception, it means just things are still moving. But it also means that they were working on this in conjunction, or in addition to pursuing a Giannis trade. But this was a priority for this team, period. And I think even if they did get Giannis, they would have been looking to do something like this too. Now the question is, could have they functionally, do they have enough assets to get Giannis and Ayo? Probably not, because I don't think they have enough to be able to get Giannis in the first place. But yeah, does that make sense? Just multiple things that they were looking at.
I mean, just again, big picture is that they were one of the teams. And if you're a longtime Timberwolves fan or follower, you're like, wait, we're in the news. Like, I even saw Chris Mannix the other day have like, are the Wolves tampering for Giannis? It's like, man, imagine telling young Kyle Teige that the Timberwolves would be involved in potential tampering allegations for one of the best players to ever play basketball. So we'll see. I guess there's a handful of hours until the deadline to see if the Giannis stuff was real, to see if Milwaukee was actually interested in dealing him. But to come back to the Ayo thing, that is a move that does kind of tell you that, like, this is a team that, to the bite on the apple thing, like, they wanted to get another guard to mix into this rotation, a rotation that, as you saw again last night in Toronto, and maybe we talk about that now, didn't have a lot of other options. When things weren't going well, they had basically 2 guys off the bench, both of them who played really well. And this Ayo piece specifically, Julian Phillips aside, Mike Conley aside, I think gets them kind of back, Dane, to maybe not 8 starters that they had a year ago, but 8 players now, especially with Bones giving it to you more and more consistently, that you can rely on to build a playoff rotation come April and May.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think Bones is a starter, but Ayo, in the way that we used that loosely with Nikhil last year, depending on how he fits in and how much he's playing, like the Bulls version of himself, I think you're getting to the point where you're closer to 7 starters. Mm-hmm. When we did a pod 2 days ago, you said the Wolves have 6.5 players, period. So that makes a difference. And your 8th man, if it's Bones, doesn't need to be a starting caliber player to be able to be a contender. So I think it greatly bolsters this bench, and just if for no other reason than it gets in the way of the minutes that were not profitable, the Clark minutes, the Conley minutes, the Shannon minutes earlier in the season, the Dillingham minutes earlier in the season. You don't have to play those guys anymore. I still think Shannon will get an opportunity. Obviously, Rob isn't on the team anymore, but it fortifies the bench in a way that it needed fortification. But let's talk about the Raptors game a little bit, because that's going to be it'd be hard to get in.
Because there's one bench player you didn't mention. Wolves 128, Raptors 126. Minnesota outscores Toronto 34-22 in the fourth quarter. A game that was very similar to many of the pods you and me and Jason, Chris, and Britt have done, with low energy. It looked like a team that had no legs. And then they found something there in that second half, led by Anthony Edwards. But got to give some credit, maybe a game ball, to Johnny Juzang, who will probably no longer be getting minutes. But a fascinating game, because, again, Dane, for how many times this season it looked like they were just kind of going through the motions, coasting. Did the trade deadline affect them? And then that fourth quarter specifically is when Ant, I thought, really turned it on. And to some of the points that Jace has made all season, and I'll throw it back to you, not only did he absolutely take the game home offensively in the mid-range, the things we've talked about all season, but he was also a force defensively. And when he plays like that, I kind of derailed your pod the other day when we did pros and cons about the Giannis trade, but when Ant plays like that both ways, you kind of get why maybe sometimes you throw yourself into the poker table of trying to get another super duper star, because he was the best player on both sides of the ball last night, especially in the fourth quarter. And that's why they stole the game in Toronto the first time in almost 20 years.
Today's show is brought to you by Surfshark, and let's talk about something that's probably more exposed than you think: your online data. I know I'm genuinely getting to the point where I'm like a little freaked out by how specific my ads are getting on my phone or on my computer, and that's where Surfshark's VPN comes in. It's your go-to solution for secure internet access. Surfshark creates a virtual private network that encrypts your entire internet activity, hiding your IP address and making your online activity invisible. I was using Surfshark's VPN when I was traveling at the airport. Prevents anyone from snooping on my data. Using Surfshark's VPN also allows me to access geo-blocked content. Again, on the road, I can watch games anywhere without being blocked out regionally using the VPN. But my personal favorite add-on is called Alternative ID, which generates a brand new online identity and email address for me to use. So when websites ask for my information, I give them the stunt double details, and my real personal data stays completely private. You get all that alongside a lightning fast VPN speed and privacy protection for unlimited devices on one single account, giving you the complete toolkit to stream, shop, and surf securely. Secure your privacy with Surfshark. It's completely risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Go to surfshark.com/DaneMoore or use code DaneMoore at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. That link and code are in the show notes and episode description below. We'll get Ant incredible at the end of the game, and absolutely going to talk about that. But let's rewind to the middle of the end of the third quarter. Juzang gets into the game. Just one note there. He's almost out of two-way days, and especially with the Wolves having numerous roster spots open. I've been hearing the possibility of Juzang getting, much like Jalen Clark last season, getting that two-way contract ripped up and signing a real NBA contract, rest of season contract, potentially a deal that is not only for the rest of this season, but also for the following season, like Jalen Clark's was, right? I would assume Juzang fills one of the quote-unquote open roster spots by becoming a roster spot player. But that's the end of the third quarter. Juzang plays. Start of the fourth quarter, the Wolves start that fourth quarter with Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle on the bench, which is something they've been doing at the beginning of second quarters and fourth quarters recently. And every time, especially whenever it doesn't go good, I'm tracking in my notes, and I got who's in the game. It's Gobert, it's Reed, it's McDaniels, it's DiVincenzo, it's Highland. And when there's 2 or 3 possessions where you're like, where is who is initiating the offense? Where is it coming from? Honestly, I'm like, it's kind of ridiculous that both Randle and Edwards are off the floor right now. Like, we know Julius can be great offensively when Edwards is off the floor. That's the start of the second quarter. It's the start of the fourth quarter. It's when the other best players are often not on the floor. Like, let Julius cook. And Finch has oftentimes not done that, and at least started those quarters without either of them on the floor, and then bringing Julius in and then bringing Ant in. But what sparked the Wolves last night were those minutes where they were both not out there. And I think it was not only Bones and Nas playing well, it was Julius and Ant were not bringing it last night. When the fourth, that was not a good energy and effort game from either of them through 3 quarters. Obviously, Ant did what he did at the end of the game, but at that point, I thought the game was saved by the Gobert, Reed, McDaniels, DiVincenzo, and Highland minutes, and specifically with the 2 of those 3 guys, Reed and Highland, who are in the game for Edwards and Randle. I mean, Bones had that pull-up 3 and pick and roll with Rudy right at the start of the quarter. He had that drive to the rim as he kind of finishes with length that they called a goaltend on. He had the kind of behind the back pass to Dante in the corner, which was skipped to Nas for one of Nas's big threes. Nas had that snatch back crossover on, I believe it was Barnes at the top of the key. And then that was the next possession. Bones behind the back to Dante in the corner. Dante skipped to Nas on the other side. Like, those guys saved the game because Edwards and Randle were not there through 3 quarters. And that's going to happen sometimes. in particular happened to Anthony Edwards. There's a pattern, of later in a long road trip that you're just not going to get the 48 minutes of Ant at a high level. That was pretty clear in the first quarter last night. But it doesn't mean that he can't turn it up for pockets of time, even in those lower energy games. And a massive credit to Ant. I thought when he checked into the game with 7 minutes to go, the Wolves are down 107 to 111. He comes in, and the first one is he rotates over to the rim from the corner and had a big block shot on, I remember if it was Quickly or Barrett or something, coming down the lane. Next possession, Ant snatched down a huge rebound in a way where he really went for the rebound, in a way he doesn't often really go for the rebounds. I thought he started that fourth quarter doing the stuff that he didn't do earlier in the game, and frankly doesn't consistently do. That got him going enough, got the team going enough, or kept them going from the Bones and Reed minutes so that Ant could get to clutch time and do what Ant does this season in clutch time and take over. It was, the sequence. He airballed that three. Everyone kind of starts booing him. He gives the crowd like, let's go, and immediately rips RJ Barrett. Pick six, goes the other way for the dunk. The subsequent possession, now Rudy's all amped up and he gets his feet moving like Jalen Clark, and he intercepts the elbow entry and he goes the other way. Like, Ant sparked the end of that fourth quarter with his own like individual talent and heroics, but he did so, and I think it's so meaningful that he did it with defense, and he was a defensive playmaker in that sort of way. This team, as incredible as Ant has been offensively in clutch time, in fourth quarters, they need him to elevate defensively to be able to win against good teams. Toronto's a good team. I mean, the teams entered that game last night with basically the same record, And I thought it was a good piece of business to get out of there with the win, and they got out of there with the win because of what Ant did at the end of the game. But I thought it started with Nas and Bones, because if Ant checks into that game and it's 107 to 117 and not 107 to 111, that's a different thing. It's a can Ant overcome that even with great play if it's a 10-point deficit with 7 points? Like, yes, he can, but it's substantially less likely. I just love the way that the fourth quarter flowed, and once the way those guys started it and the way the starters finished it was made for, I thought, one of the best fourth quarters of the season after, the first three quarters were some of the most, like you said, some of the most frustrating basketball the Wolves have played this year.
It does. Coaching is just fascinating to me. I'll never. I think it was Bill. I know. The next generation is not going to take care of me in the nursing home for this. But I always remember. I think it was Bill Simmons who would always get just irate when Scott Brooks would not have Durant or Westbrook on the court at all times. So it's like, why do you have? This was after Harden was out. Like, why would you take both your players off the court at the same time? And that happens, I think, a lot this season. To your point, and it frustrates me a lot. It's like, why would you not at any point have Ant or Julius on the court? They're, your two best offensive players. But then conversely, I do have to ask myself, when neither of them are bringing it, like, because then you hear the people like, why don't they hold Ant and Julius to the same standard as Rob? I kind of thought Chris Finch did that last night. And he said, you know what? You guys just are not bringing it. So I'm just going to play this other 5-man lineup. And by the way, if they lose by 18 last night, Chris Finch is getting cooked for not having Ant or Julius out there to start the fourth quarter. You know what I mean? Like, it is.
And that's why I was kind of doing hand up. Like, I was about to at the start of the fourth quarter. I was like, seriously? Because of the fourth, it was a 94-104. And he rolls out Gobert, Reed, McDaniels, DiVincenzo, Highland. I'm like, what?
But and I'm not even giving him right. I'm not giving him the game ball because I already went to Johnny. Like, I'm not saying that Chris Finch is this genius. Like, there's been a lot of moments this year where you can poke at, and he's even said after the game, I should have done this. I should have done this. So you are playing the result here. But I did find it fascinating that for those first 2.5, maybe even 3 quarters, if you watch the game again, like, Ant and Julius did not have it. And there was a lot of guys that didn't really have it, but to play that card and be like, okay, we have 6.5 good players. The two best ones just aren't bringing it. We'll just play 4.5 to start the fourth quarter. And in a meaningful game, like, all these games now are starting to be a little more valuable. And for them to do that and then it lead towards, like you said, I don't know if Ant comes in with that two-way energy or that look in his eye. I mean, dude, the lick the lips thing, if people haven't seen what Dane said, Ant catches the ball in the slot, airballs the three, and the Toronto fans go crazy. And he immediately starts gesturing like louder, like, okay, licks his lips, immediately comes down, strips RJ Barrett, gets the dunk. And then after the dunk, puts his hand up in the air again of like, okay, like now are you going to make noise? Then there's the Rudy steal. And then there's all those little mid-range shots to ice the game. So that was one of the more fun wins for me because it was playing a lot of the same cards that have pissed me off, for better or worse, all season. And it worked last night. So then you kind of put rose-colored glasses on. But it was a big win. And it also showed you again, I'm sure they're hammering that home the next time they watch film of like, man, when you play like that, like Anthony Edwards on both sides of the ball, like it not only leads towards winning, but I loved your point about the Rudy thing. Like it kind of gassed up everybody. Like everybody on that team was hyped. And not just because he was hitting mid-range shots, it's because he was basically unstoppable on the defensive end. That block was incredible. Kind of, it wasn't the same as the chase down block in Indiana, but he gets up there like no one else can. And that was a really cool fourth quarter. And it just reminds you of, you know, when you tweet in game, whatever, like the emotions of a basketball game, because at halftime it was like, holy shit, they need to make 4 trades. And then they pull off that win. And then funny to put all of this together, the win in Toronto, they haven't done it in 2 decades or whatever. John Krasinski said the Wolves actually stayed in Toronto last night, flying home today. The Bulls got into Toronto last night. So probably an easy flight for Ayo and Julian Phillips to just hop on the plane and fly back to Minnesota. So a big win. Again, I do think now as we turn the page from January to February, all these games matter. It doesn't matter if it's an Eastern Conference thing, last game of a road trip, whatever. Like you got to start stacking these wins a little more. And Minnesota wakes up today, despite a very roller coastery season, 1 game out of the 3 seed in the Western Conference standings.
The last thing I want to hit on from that game and just sort of a theme of the Wolves recently is the defense dropping off. And it was, again, not a good defensive rating game. When we recorded before on Tuesday, we talked about how in games where the Wolves have a defensive rating of 120 or higher, they're 1-10 in those games this season. It's been a pretty clear line of demarcation. When they don't defend, even at an average level, they lose. In part because, one, you're giving up more points, but because their defense kind of does fuel their offense. Last night they did, again, was 122 defensive rating, so now they're 2-10 in those games because they came back. But this has been a real long pattern for this Wolves team. I know at halftime it made for 8 straight quarters of allowing 30-plus points. That's not acceptable for any team to be winning, or you're just not going to win if you're consistently giving up 30 points a quarter. And this team was really stuck in that rut. But I was noting during the game, the defense being awful. There's just like one period of time where it's the non-Rudy minutes. And, you know, we've talked about the non-Rudy minutes going back to training camp and over the course of the season, and just the struggle when it's Reed and Randall. And there was a period of time during the game where it was Reed, Randall, McDaniels, Ant, and Bones. And what I wrote down in my notes was even a locked-in Ant can't save this group defensively. You know, Jaden and like it's not enough because the Reed Randall front court is a problem and Bones is a problem as a defender there. And I relate that to Ayo. And now I think the Wolves in the Reed Randall minutes can consistently have coverage at the wings and guards. Like you should be able to be having that should be Ayo instead of Bones in that spot, right? And then have Bones, if you can, try and finagle it so Bones is playing in the Rudy minutes a little bit more. But that group, you know, that has just been a thing all season, the Reed and Randall front court minutes. And while Mike had very many issues offensively, oftentimes he was out there with that group, and that at least gave you a competent body in knowing where to be all the time. And that wasn't enough either. Like, they need a competent body that knows where to be all the time and has some more size and some more defensive skill like Ayo does or like Dante does, and you can put in those spots. I think a low key piece of this Ayo move is that it gives them coverage in the Reed Randall minutes, which we know with a bullet need coverage. Now, it still, that doesn't address the front court, but no more of the minutes where it's McDaniels is your only real defender out there and Ant's floating around defensively, Bones is floating around defensively, Reed and Randall are. You got to have another good defensive guard out there, and I think that's important. And I think this team needs to use the momentum of the Ayo acquisition to get back to where they were a couple weeks ago defensively, because this team, as has always been the case, goes as, or at least is currently constructed, goes as far as their defense does. So again, I don't think Ayo is the level of defender Nikhil is. I think that could be bothersome at times over the course of the experience, but it's definitely an upgrade from Bones. And I think physically it's an upgrade from Mike Conley as well there, and maybe replaces Jalen Clark completely, who's also not been great defensively. But I just wanted to point to like a functional example of, okay, Ayo's now out there with this group. That group is now better defensively. Here's why, and last night that really stood out to me of like, you can't save these minutes. You need better defensive personnel out there. They have that now with Dosunmu.
And it makes you think of what Ant said, wasn't a couple days ago, or to you in Memphis, about maybe the way for him to be better defensively or give you more defensive juice is to maybe give up a little more offensively. And Ayo can definitely get you some buckets. He can space the floor, all those things. So they're going to need, I mean, as we think about back-to-back Western Conference Finals runs and all that stuff, for them to crack that ceiling and go further, whether he likes it or not, like, it's going to have to be Ant being one of the best defenders out on the court at all times, despite playing alongside two of the best in the league in Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels. So maybe this will allow him to, we've kind of talked about this and theoretized about just, could Ant have little less responsibilities through the first 3.5 quarters offensively, diversify that portfolio, let him get a couple more stops, and then the fourth quarter, like, we're still going to go to you. Like, we're still going to let you take the ball and isolate. You have spots down on the court. And last night, albeit that first 36-ish minutes, like, that's kind of a formula for winning. Like, they do have a lot of guys on this team now that can get a bucket, that work well with each other. I mean, the Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert thing, Jaden's assist rate to him has just skyrocketed. Like, they have options. Adding another piece to this mix, this rotation should help. But at the end of the game, if Ant is the best player on both sides of the court, as we talk about a top 7 guy in the league, that really increases your chances of winning any basketball game, especially come playoff time. So, fun trade. I don't think there has been nothing else.
I got one more update.
Okay.
Shams just tweeted that the Bucks are holding on to Giannis and are looking to make other moves. And I'm getting indication that means the Wolves are done at the deadline. That's not certain, but this might be the move. The Ayo is the only move in terms of a real transaction. There's, again, I'm saying this at 11 a.m. The deadline's in a couple hours, but that's the indication I'm getting as of this moment. And the Bucks are reiterating to Shams that they are not making a move. So again, as of 11 a.m. Looks like Giannis is not happening, and it looks like the Wolves are done for this trade deadline, and we'll get to do it all over again in June.
As I say, do you want to text Britt and be like, I guess I don't need you later today? No, that's a fun way to end this. An hour in. It's scary to do content the morning of a trade deadline because there's so many moving pieces, but they were active again, and it's not all, let Tim cook. There are mistakes that were, I guess, admitted this week, right? By some of the transactions that 4 second-round picks sounds like nothing, but in this new CBA, like, it is something. Like, it is an asset that, I remember when Denver had to trade like 4 to 6 second-round picks to get off of Reggie Jackson. A Denver team that probably would have really enjoyed having Ayo Dosunmu on their team for this playoff run. So it is fascinating that other teams weren't kicking the tires on that, but Minnesota did, and they have exhausted even more of their assets, and they will have to pay the Rob Dillingham tax at some point down the road.
I mean, part of it too, Kyle, is like them viewing the ability to bring back Ayo. Like you bring up Denver in particular. Like Denver is going to struggle to even be able to bring Peyton Watson back. Like they're going to struggle to be able to bring their right. So for Denver, and it probably doesn't make as much sense to go get Ayo when if you're Denver that he would very likely be a rental. The Wolves are in a position. That's why probably a big part of the reason why they made the move is that they feel positioned to be able to, retain him in the offseason, given the flexibility they have from not having traded or not having re-signed Nickeil Alexander-Walker, from Mike Conley's $10.5 million coming off the books. Like the Wolves are in a position to do the pre-agency game. And I would assume in Ayo's eyes and his agency's eyes that's that's attractive to them, because you got to think about it from his perspective too, of like, well, the Wolves wouldn't be able to sign me in the summer. There might not there's layers to this, right? It could be if the Bulls know that they're not going to, if I'm Ayo and the Bulls, I'm getting indications that the Bulls are not going to bring me back in the summer, then I'm going into free agency being like, okay, well, there's only these teams who could offer me any sort of contract. Well, these teams list now increased by one, in that the Timberwolves are in it, because they can be one of those teams who can bring him back. And they're a team with a positional fit need and, a desire theoretically to retain him as well. So I think Ayo makes more sense for the Wolves than it might for some other teams who, to your point, could use a player like Ayo for the rest of the season. Are you giving up 4 second-round picks, the 8th overall pick from 2 years ago, the 33 overall pick from 3 years ago, to get a rental? No, that would if this proves to be a rental, I'm not going to love this trade for the Wolves, right? But it doesn't look like it is going to be that, and I don't think they would have made the move had they not gotten strong indications that they could keep him beyond the season.
We're going to get a really fun Dane Moore, Britt Robson podcast later today, probably talking about that Raptors game a little more, as well as just the trade deadline officially being closed. But I got to ask, because we were the first ones to watch him back in the day when we snuck into that Vegas game, Wemby versus Scoot, but then Leonard Miller was also out there. Do you have any parting stories, any lasting memories of the Leonard Miller tenure in Minnesota?
Just a hilarious kid. I mean, were you there that one time, the Michael Jordan black and white thing? Yeah. I told that story before. Leonard asked us, like, I don't know, I was making conversation in the locker room of like, who are the players that you watch when you grow up? Because he's, I'm 36 and he's 22 or whatever. I was like, I don't know. Like when I was a kid, Michael Jordan. I guess, I don't know. I watched Michael Jordan. And then he goes, were those games in black and white? I'm like, what are you talking about? I go, have you not seen a highlight of Michael Jordan ever? They're clearly in color. But no, he was goofy. He was always really nice. I will say one piece, a rough locker spot is the spot right next to Anthony Edwards. He's been on Anthony Edwards' left for the last 2 seasons. It's rough from a media availability standpoint. Like we are always gathered around Ant's locker, to take video and do the interview afterwards. And Lenny is just always like iced out, just like a towel waiting for us to finish interviewing Ant. And he was always, kind and cordial about that. I mean, as a player, I don't know, man. I never really got to see enough of him for me to I don't know if I ever, in the 3 years he's been on the team, made a case for Leonard Miller to be playing. I never saw enough that like would spark that, but we never really got to see him play. And as of now, he's in Chicago, who has like, is Yabusele the only other big there right now? Like, I don't know. I'm excited to watch Leonard play. I think he's a guy who can like put up some numbers, like give you like a 12-8 game here and there off the bench. I think he's active. He's big, broad shoulders. But I always kind of had a feeling similar to Josh Minot with him, of like, could you functionally deliver, at least at this age, real role player minutes for a team that views themselves as a contender? And that's a high bar, and especially if you aren't getting a lot of opportunity, even in practice. I don't know. I was never sold, just from what I'd seen, that was something that Leonard could do, but he now will, whether it's in Chicago or if he moves somewhere else, I think it likely means he gets an opportunity. And yeah, I mean, we'll tune in and watch those, but good kid.
I think
he was really nice.
What's most fascinating is Leonard Miller's only 22 years old. Rob Dillingham's only 21 years old. And now they're freed. I mean, I think it is valid criticism to be like, they never got a chance. And I don't know. I struggle with that all the time of like, do these guys not get minutes because the coach hates them, or do they not get minutes because behind the scenes, they're just not doing anything in practice? If you're not doing anything in practice, why would you get minutes in the game? So it'll be fascinating. I think those guys will both get a chance.
Tough team, just with how many bigs have been here his entire time, to even like accidentally get an opportunity, it's just,
they're different. I mean, Rob was a lottery pick, but like, I remember Jalen Noel was like a tough team to crack the rotation, and then Jalen Noel was shipped off, and he was out of the league. So Leonard Miller has taxpayer mid-level with the Sacramento Kings written all over him. Like, he just seems like the perfect. They trade Sabonis, and Leonard Miller gives you 14 and 10. But yeah, I'm gonna be watching. I mean, I will if they get minutes for the Bulls on a Bulls team that has no direction. It'll be fascinating to see if they can, now freed from Chris Finch's doghouse, I guess, will they be able to develop with a new team, a new situation? I think they both needed that. Again, they're young kids, and your basketball career can be out relatively quickly. So exciting morning. You got any other texts you want to read, or?
No, I just saw our guy Jake Fisher with a tweet where he said, quote, "They were never serious," end quote, said one team executive who was discussing a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade with Milwaukee.
Jake Fisher's my favorite guy doing this, but that's not what they were reporting for the last week. Let's just be honest. I mean, you and I had always been skeptical, and I'm just saying
I'd been skeptical. That had been my skepticism.
I subscribed to their Substack, and I got 4 emails a day from him and Mark Stein, 2 of the best to do it. But it was like, Wolves are now trying harder, and they've flirted with the third team, and now they've got it. It's like, you just got to be the slop in 2026 is always fascinating to read the tea leaves. So if it is true, and I believe you, and I believe that that tweet that maybe they weren't as interested as people say, but I also think this front office, as long as they are together, all those pieces, Tim and Matt and all those guys, anytime a big name is available, right? Like, they were kicking the tires on the Durant stuff last summer, and now Giannis is available. They're always going to be in the mix. And when you're a fan of a small market team, that's still kind of hard to digest, but they didn't do nothing. They addressed a very serious need. They opened their mouths a little bit, and now they will try to take another bite at an apple in a Western Conference that, outside of the defending champs, I still think is pretty wide open. So these final 30-ish games are going to be fascinating, and it helps that you get a steal of a victory last night in Toronto.
I know I put in our outline, talk about some of the other moves that went on in the West that I think impact the Wolves, but Britt and I will get to that this afternoon. And it's time now, if the Wolves are in fact done, to take stock of where they are. And to do that is to take stock of where the rest of the league is. Obviously, the McCain trade to Oklahoma City is big. And I mean, for me, like the trade stuff is all fun, but the most fun I have is like watching how this all functionally plays out. The players on the new teams, because sometimes it's great and you find your Nikhil, and all of a sudden it's way more than you expected a player's impact to be. But oftentimes we get, I don't know, we blow up expectations for what a move can be and how immediately impactful it'll be. It's really hard to be traded, to make a trade, to get a player who immediately helps your team with 28 games or whatever left in the season. That's going to be a challenge for the Wolves with Ayo. I think he's the type of player who folds in pretty well from a skill set standpoint, but this stuff's complicated. We've been doing this long enough to know and to have talked to players of like, my first week after the trade deadline, my first 2 weeks, my head was spinning, and they're not really themselves until they settle in, which is, again, something to track here, but also something to track elsewhere, and not not immediately crown the Thunder because they made a great move, right? I like that move for them, but they got to functionally make that all work too. Gordon Hayward didn't work 2 years ago. I don't know. So I'm looking forward to assessing the entire trade landscape. And even if Giannis isn't getting traded, and even if the Wolves are done, there's more to happen here in the next couple of hours. We're signing off here at 11:15. So if something else comes up, know that that's where we are in the flow of this thing. And if anything else happens, Britt and I will be on to talk about it this evening.
Can I just tell you my favorite one? Because I had prepped for this, and all these big trades come, and I've always complained about how this new CBA sucks for fans because it makes it so much harder to do the trade machines and stuff, and everything's illegal, and there's these trade exceptions and all these second-round picks. Old school Kyle just loves when it's James Harden for Darius Garland. You know what I mean? Just like the old school, like, I'll give you my guy, you give me your guy. There's no like third, fourth team. You don't have to factor in like Real Madrid's roster. It's just, I'm going to give you my point guard, you give me your point guard, and we'll see if it changes. But also, too, I did love the Mike Conley 3-team trade when the graphic, because now every reporter has a graphic, and the Timberwolves was just empty. It was just blue and green space of what did they receive? They received nothing. So
and more to come on that. I mean, that's the thing, is like, even if they're done making moves, this this Conley reacquisition is something to monitor, a la the Andrew Bogut rule of being traded multiple times and then bought out. So even if they make no more trades, that's another addition that they can make to this team. And then also buyout guys. I'll probably spend some more time this afternoon thinking about buyout guys, but that's a conversation to have with Britt as well. Would certainly not hurt to add a Kyle Anderson or, some of those other guys who are, have the potential to be bought out on the contracts that they're currently on. I'd be kind of stunned if the Wolves don't add someone in the buyout market, given the empty roster spots. But like I said, I don't know, maybe that's Juzang, and, they just kind of roll with what they got. But whatever they do, we'll be here to talk about it. He's Kyle Teige. Follow him on Twitter at Kyle Teige. I don't know the next time he'll be on, but we'll keep moving with this thing. It's going to be, it's a bit like it. The NBA doesn't stop. The Wolves play tomorrow against the Pelicans. For some reason, they play at 2 p.m. on Super Bowl Sunday, and I would assume if not
Adam
Friday,
Silver will
then
pay
Sunday.
For this. That is what.
But I gotta go if that's like Ayo's first game.
What are we doing? We can just take that day off. Just give it to the NFL. It's fine. Have fun covering. Just make a squares board or something. I don't know. Just
Jace already made a squares board. Yeah, we're doing
okay.
It.
Fun deadline though. Again, in a couple hours left. This will publish as soon as we can. Shout out to Cooper Carlson for always getting that stuff up and posted right away. But a fun deadline, and a team now that we're a couple hours away, right, from really starting to talk about basketball stuff again, like mixed in guys to the rotation. How's it all going to look? Guys are out of the doghouse, new guys are in. So fascinating final couple months coming up for this team.
Yep. Until this evening with Britt Robson, he's Kyle Teige on Dane Moore. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah. Hope you dancing like